All right. Does anybody have any announcements for the sake of the whole group? Announcements for the sake of the whole group. Okay, dear President.
Okay, I got two. Besides for doing at 4 o'clock, we are going to continue our discussion with our addition to the day school. So, and you can look at that on Zoom too if you don't want to go here. But we're just going to have an informal discussion. So go with your questions, opinions, name it, we'll go through that. And the other thing is tomorrow night at 6:30 we have a food proceeding.
Okay, very good. And that meeting will be down here in this room tonight, 4 o'clock. All right. Speaking about this meeting in this room, Catechism Youth Church class will actually start tonight at 6:30, and we'll also meet down here. Let's start down here. All right. Any other announcements for the sake of the whole group? The whole group. Going once. Going twice. Wow. All right. All right. Very good. How about we get with Catechism? There we go. Fifth commandment. All right. So just repeat it after me. You shall not murder.
You shall not murder.
We should fear and love God.
We should fear and love God.
So that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor.
So that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor
In his body.
in his body,
But help and support him.
but help and support him
In every physical need.
in every physical need.
All right, Sunday school is dismissed. Sunday school is dismissed. All right, so today's topic is in the Songs of Isaiah. I do apologize for getting the slides a little later than normal. Usually I'm pretty good about getting it to those of you who asked for an email. Try to get it to you by Wednesday or Thursday prior. It was yesterday. So the thing is, I've had these slides done too. It's just slipped my mind. So mea culpa, mea culpa, mea maxa, mea culpa. So those of you who are laughing. All right. So we're at Isaiah chapter 14, towards the end, starting verse 28. Today, what we want to cover is what is the oracles concerning the nations. This is a special section in Isaiah, if you will. We're going to talk about what these actually entail. Then I'm going to talk about what's an oracle. And then we'll look at one example of an oracle, it's a pretty short one, concerning Philistia. So, first question is, what are the oracles concerning the nations? Glad you asked. Alright, so there are a couple clear section marks in Isaiah, like there's one part that says, this ends book 1, or this ends book 2. There's like a little section, but again, that's like 40 chapters long, or 20 chapters long, the sections are. So you don't have a clear-cut like way of we'll say dividing up the text and try to make it sense. Now, on the other hand, if you read it as a whole, it does seem to have some kind of flow to it. And Bible commentators will all try their hand at trying to figure out, okay, how is this organized? What is the flow of thought? Are there sections or subsections in Isaiah? And basically, they do their best guess based on some common kind of things they see, like, all right, we'll just lump this section together. So, according to the Lutheran Study Bible, chapters 1 to 12 deal with the judgment on Judah and Jerusalem. Chapters 13 to 23 are the oracles concerning the nations. And then chapters 24, 27, God's cosmic judgment. And then a refocus back on Ephraim and Jerusalem, chapters 28 to 32. Again, there are various ways to organize it. This is not clear cut, and there is some, some areas where it doesn't quite fit precisely in line, but close enough. Close enough. With a hammer in the right place, anything is possible. Right? We'll make it fit, right? Give it encouragement, and it'll fit. Same thing with like how to organize Isaiah. We'll make it fit. So that's what they did. All right. So what we have in chapters 13 to 23 in Isaiah are a bunch of oracles concerning nations. So which nations are in the list? Well, we've got Babylon, we've got Assyria, Philistia, Moab, Damascus/Syria, Cush, Egypt, the wilderness of the sea, Duma, Arabia, Jerusalem, Tyre and Sidon. Wow, that's quite a list. So basically, there's a lot of, if you will, past and present nations. Some of those nations will continue in the future, some won't. Some of these nations are very large. Some of them are actually pretty small. Some of them are really near to the border of Jerusalem. Others are pretty far away. Some of these nations are very strong in their military power and threaten a lot of nations around them. Others, these nations are extremely weak and have no real strength and will give in to any kind of military conflict pretty quick. Some of these are north, south, east, west, every direction. Some of these nations have completely forsaken God. You know, that God would not be able to find one who would bow down to only Him. And some of these nations still contain a faithful few, where the Lord has preserved His people. And sometimes in these oracles, He even addresses those people who have remained faithful to Him despite the overall rejection of that nation. Okay? So it's just a very wide range, and there is no unifying theme that you can lump all these nations together. Right? There is no common thread, if you will, except for the fact that the prophet Isaiah addresses them in chapters 13 to 23. All right, so those are the nations, and we talk about the section of Isaiah. Now, of course, we have to ask the question: what's an oracle? Right? That's a word we don't really use much today. Well, in Hebrew, that word oracle is masah, and the basic root of that word is the verb nasa, which means to lift up, to bear, to carry, or to take. And basically this noun has two basic definitions. One, a load, a burden, or the act of lifting or bearing, or it refers to the contents of what's carried. In usual everyday speech, the most common example would be tribute or an offering. Like that you carry an offering to God, or you carry your tribute, you carry your taxes to the capital, to the emperor, or to the king. Okay, so tribute seems to be the common use of this word. But it can also mean an utterance, a prophetic utterance, an oracle or revelation. And of course, in Isaiah, definition number 2 probably fits it pretty good. But if you like to put these two things together, what do you get? Maybe a lifting up of the voice, a declaration, a message that is carried, and delivered. Okay? So God has something to say, right? And it needs to be delivered. Okay? So that's what a Messiah is. That's what an oracle is in the Hebrew original language, Old Testament use. Oracles are found in the Bible in a couple spots. The highest concentration is actually Isaiah chapter 13, verse 23. That is the highest concentration of the word oracle, hence the way it's translated, and hence the name for the section of Scripture. It's just so prevalent. And almost every single caption, if you notice, it'll say, an oracle concerning blank. Right? An oracle concerning blank. An oracle concerning blank. And that's how all these sections start, or most of them start. There's one example in Jeremiah 23 that's actually just, actually a couple times in Jeremiah chapter 23, where it just says, declares the Lord, right? The utterance of the Lord. Some Bibles might say oracle of the Lord, most will say declares the Lord. There's a couple pronouncements given in 2 Kings and in 2 Chronicles. How about we take a look at that one here? 2 Kings chapter 9. 2 Kings chapter 9. Verses 24 to 36. Right, and especially verse 25. Let's see if someone has the ESV handy. Can someone read that out loud for us? 2 Kings 9, verse 24 to 26.
And Jehu drew his bow with his full strength and shot Joram between the shoulders, so that the arrow pierced his heart, and he sank in his chariot. Jehu said to Bidkar, his aide, take him up and throw him on the plot of ground belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember when you and I rode side by side behind Ahab his father, how the Lord made this pronouncement against him.
26.
As surely as I saw yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, declares the Lord, I will repay you on this plot of ground. Now therefore take him up and throw him on the plot of ground in accordance with the word of the Lord.
Okay. And in verse 25, the word is actually oracle, but in the ESV it's pronouncement against. Do I have any other? Yeah.
Burden.
Burden.
All
Wow.
of it in the King James.
The King James says the Lord made this burden against it.
Laid this burden upon him.
Wow.
So it seems like when it's an oracle that's like, because burden, it's a weight, it's a thing that's going to be your problem and not anyone else's. These are not, you don't want an oracle against you, apparently.
Yeah, generally speaking, we don't want an oracle against us, right? There are some times where it can be a little more positive, but more often than not, especially when God is dealing with unbelief, when he's dealing with wickedness, and he has something to say, it's not going to be pretty, right? It's going to be a burden, right? And that's actually, you notice that the King James kind of takes into account that, number one, right? A load or a burden. Like these are some heavy words which God has to say, and we're fulfilled, right? And say, I mean, think about that burden, is that God pronounces basically a really harsh word of curse against you, and you're thinking, is this going to happen to me? Is this going to happen to me? And then again, it, yeah.
And he has more focused prophecy against it.
A prophecy against, right? Yep, very similar, without more nuance. Yeah. Any other Bible translations? The end of verse 25, pronouncement, prophecy, burden. All right, we got a flavor for it. All right. Yep, again, another oracle against somebody. Let's take a look at Proverbs 31, just for a moment. That's a good, see, there are good examples, so let's look at the good. Let's look at the good. Proverbs, that's after Psalm, right? Yep, there you go, Psalms, Proverbs. All day. So Proverbs 31, now verses 1 to 9. So the words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. What are you doing, my son? What are you doing, son of my womb? What are you doing, son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to take strong drink, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed, and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to the one who is perishing, and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty, and remember their misery no more. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. Yeah, there you go. Right? So there's a little bit of a warning in there, right? There's some admonition, right? You know, don't fall into the trap of drunkenness, right? So, yeah. So, yeah, there's some good counsel behind these words that King Lemuel's mother taught him. All right, and an interesting way is actually if you look at Nahum, the prophet Nahum, or Habakkuk or Malachi, but I'll show you Nahum. So right before Habakkuk and Malachi, Jonah, Micah, Nahum. Nahum 1, verse 1. Notice the heading. What concerning Nineveh? An oracle. And because it's at 1 verse 1, same thing with Habakkuk and Malachi, you almost get the feeling that maybe the entire prophecy, the entire book, is an oracle. So it's just another kind of prophetic utterance from the Lord, a message that the Lord has. All right, and which Nahum, Habakkuk, and Malachi deliver. All right, so our good old buddy Noah Webster, oracle in our language comes from French, Latin, and Spanish, oraculum, oro, oraculo, basic root to utter. Right? One way is among the pagans. It's the answer of a god or some person reputed to be a god. An inquiry made respecting some affair of importance. Like they're asking God or goddesses or the gods, and they inquire about, well, what do I do for this business venture? I need to make a decision, I need your counsel. What do the gods say? Right? Or for making decisions to go into war. Right? Yeah, the Oracle of Delphi, right? Or you see some of those movies where they consult the gods, right? The one that comes to my mind is, there's that one. It's like a number, it's like 300 or something like that, where the Greeks go up against. The Spartans go up against Xerxes, right? And the people of Sparta consult oracles. All right. Number 2 for Webster, among Christians, oracles denotes communications, revelations, or messages delivered by God to the prophets. So the oracles of God, usually a nickname for the Scriptures, or especially the Old Testament Scriptures. Right? The oracles of God. What God has to say, what He reveals through His messengers. And then another definition, Webster gives any person reputed or reputed uncommonly wise whose determinations are not disputed, or whose opinions are of great authority. Okay, so if someone really wise has something to say because of, who they are or what they know, great. Yeah.
Computer science and oracle is something that answers questions.
Yeah, an oracle is someone who answers questions. Still used in some circles today. All right, but here's the main point. If God has something to say to someone, what should happen? Okay, number one. But what has to happen prior to listening? Someone has to speak it, right? If God has a message, He has something to say to someone, someone's got to deliver the message.
And I would think of oracle that would, pretty much mean it has to be spoken.
Yes, right. That the prophet actually has to go somewhere, take that message, maybe carry it if it is of very serious importance, right? Very heavy, very harsh word of warning or correction. They actually have to physically internalize that message and then deliver it, right? And then you're right. If God has something to say to someone, we should listen, right? And the burden, but unfortunately, sometimes that message isn't heard or listened to. But that's not on the prophet, right? That's on the hearers. Right? So that's the point of an oracle. Music connections. Any songs or kinds of songs that lift up the singer's voice to declare something. Any kind of music or songs out there that actually declare something. Like they have a message and they're there to say it.
Oh, like a college fight song.
College fight songs, right? Yeah, we have a message. We're gonna win.
Yeah.
Rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they all are the same. They have different words, but they're all the same.
Yeah. Same with like all the European national anthems.
Yeah.
Right? They used to be so cool. All right, yeah. What kinds of songs declare God's word? Hymns, right? Hymns and spiritual songs, right? Psalms, right? They declare God's word. And we have some great examples of hymnodies that actually are just paraphrases of what God says in Scripture, and we declare it. Sometimes you'll even see quotation marks where it's like, this is what God said, right? And we sing it. Sometimes in 4-part harmony. It's great. Okay, so here are the oracles that I want to cover in class. I'm not going to do all of them, but just to get a good smattering and feel for what these oracles are about. So we'll look at Philistia, Philistines. That's easier to say. Moab, Cush, is that Babylon? Jerusalem, Tyre, and Sidon. So this is a good wide range of these oracles. So, any other kind of questions on what an oracle is? All right. Are we good on what an oracle is? All right. Yes?
Do we know if Isaiah had to actually go to all these
We don't know. The jury is split on that. The jury is split. Some say that yes, Isaiah is to go to those places and deliver. And in the best case scenario, they do. But also, some of these nations come to them, right? They send envoys, right? They send people, officially on behalf of the king. So there are like emissaries around. So, and whenever the emissary or, some kind of officer from these nations come, and then when everything goes right, and there's good order and structure, Isaiah will know from the king, whenever these official visits are, and is like, hey, I got a message for that guy, right? He needs to send this back to his king, right? And then they tell the oracle. Or it could be written down and delivered. Paul's epistles, for example, epistles are what? Letters, right? And so instead of visiting all those places because he couldn't, right? He wrote a letter, and would send it via mail or anyone else who was traveling, and get that message to them to be read. Or the theory is, yeah, go ahead.
Along with, I mean, at this time, if you were going to take something somewhere that you had written down, it was probably pretty heavy because it wasn't on paper. It was in clay tablets. So if it's a great big long oracle concerning, like, because I don't think back in Philistia and Moab and Cush, they didn't have like paper. They were still using cuneiform, weren't they?
I don't know. They might have papyrus, or like kind of the early ones.
Because then it would make sense for it to be a burden, because like a big old stack of clay tablets with bad news on it.
Yeah, that would be a burden.
Yeah.
Literally a burden, in more ways than one. But I think they still had like, yeah, sheepskin, lamb, you know, the skin of vellum, that kind of stuff.
I think that was probably 500 years
Yeah,
by this time.
yeah.
Well, Isaiah was written on scroll.
Right, Isaiah was written on scroll. We knew that. Yeah,
It was also pretty common back then. You've heard the phrase, don't kill the messenger.
yeah,
That happened. If you brought bad news, the king might look, he was looking to hit out at anybody that was around, and the messenger was the unfortunate person.
yeah. Yeah, don't shoot the messenger.
And I mean, you even see that sometimes with the oracles and the reading that we went through in 2 Kings, where Jehu eradicates the house of Ahab.
Yeah,
The minor prophet that Elisha sent to Jehu to go tell him, hey, you're anointed king, Elisha tells that minor prophet, hey, go give your oracle and then get out of town. Don't linger, flee.
yeah, yeah. It was a heavy responsibility. Killing the messenger is basically sinning against the king, right? It's sinning against it's sending a bad message that we are not to be reasoned with, and we're not going to reason with you. And that's when things go south really quick. That's what's out. Things go south really quick. All right. So hopefully that answers. Oh, the other side of the theory is that these oracles were also messages for Jerusalem, for the Israelites to hear. So God had some words concerning all the nations, concerning the nations that were at odds with the people, concerning the nations that threatened them, and that God would actually reveal their swift end as a word of comfort, as a word of patience, as a word of vengeance is mine, declares the Lord. So people are kind of in debate of those two realities. I think it could be both. It's like give a Lutheran an either or question. What do you say? And I think there's a little of both. Like if these messages were able to be delivered, they were, in whatever way they could. But there was also a message for God's people, for their learning, for their own warnings, that if we end up like these nations, things are not going to be good for us. And some people listened, some people didn't. Right? They didn't learn their lessons, and instead many became like these nations did, especially Israel, northern kingdoms, and about 200 years later, Jerusalem did too. All right, oracles. All right, any other questions about oracles? What they are, what they aren't, before we get into their examples.
At least in the Greek antiquity, an oracle was both the thing that was said and the person you had to go visit to say them.
Yeah.
So in that sort of application, to some extent, does that mean Isaiah himself is an oracle?
Yeah, we could say that, right? He's a prophet, he's an oracle, and so is the message that he delivers is an oracle, right? It kind of goes back to, it can refer to the load itself, it can be to the act of lifting or bearing, or the contents of what's carried, right? you gotta remember is that there's only so many letters in the Hebrew alphabet, so I mean they have to be extremely efficient with their word choice, and it can mean a lot of different things based on the context. So yeah, I mean all of this. So yes, he is an oracle because he has something from God to say, and because it's from God, it is uncommonly wise, right? Kind of like our epistle for today, right? The wisdom from above is what we see, right? And of course, what greater example than these are inspired words by the Holy Spirit. Wisdom, true wisdom from above, infallible wisdom from above. All right, Philistia. I think I said that right. Philistia. Yeah. Philistia. I like that better. All right. Who's Philistia? Or who are the Philistines? Okay, so what do you know about Philistia? They used to be a powerful nation to the west of Jerusalem. Because remember, Jerusalem didn't go all the way to the coast in all the places. There were a few places that kind of landlocked Jerusalem, landlocked Judah from the coast. And one of these ancient nations was Philistia. They often oppressed Israel during the time of the Judges. Okay, they were a thorn in the people's side before King Saul and King David, King Solomon. Right? Actually, pretty much to the early days of King David, they were a thorn in the side to the Israelites. Again, I talk about prime real estate. Right? They got the coast. They got all the shipping and all that good stuff. Right? Their cities included Jaffa, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Gaza. So those of you who are geography buffs, there you go. And their false gods and goddesses, the main ones, Baal, or Baal, Asherah, and Dagon. And I think there was even a time when I remember Dagon, that was when the Ark of the Covenant got stolen, right? The Philistines came and stole the Ark of the Covenant and put it in the temple of Dagon, right? And then to stay there overnight, what happened to the big statue of Dagon? Yeah, it fell over, right? Yeah, so that's the Philistines. All right, so let's take a look at the text. So, we are in chapter 14. Good question. Chapter 14. Isaiah 14, verses 28 to 32. Man, that's like the whole thing. Okay. Who would like to read the whole oracle? Who can take this burden on? All right.
The oracle came in the year King Uzziah died. Do not rejoice, all you Philistines, that the rod that struck you is broken. From the root of that snake will spring up a viper. Its fruit will be a guarding venomous serpent. The horse of the poor will find pasture, and the needy will lie down in safety. But your root I will destroy by famine. I will slay your survivors. Wail, O gate, howl, O city, melt away, all you Philistines. A cloud of smoke comes from the north, and there is not a straggler in its ranks. What answer shall be given to the envoys of that nation? The Lord has established Zion, and in her his afflicted people will find refuge.
This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, so we get a little setting, right? Who died? King Ahaz, right? So most will say 715 BC. Okay? Here's the fun question. Who's the rod that struck Philistia? Right? It says, rejoice not, O Philistia, all of you, all y'all, right? That the rod that struck you is broken. So who's the rod that struck Philistia? That's the $1 million question, right? Some possible answers. It could be Ahaz, right? It just said Ahaz died, so it could be King Ahaz. It could be David, because David was like the rod to destroy the Philistines, right? I think Samson, prior to David, also had quite a discipline, the Lord's discipline upon the Philistines. But I think David comes to mind, number one answer, right? You're talking about someone who struck down the Philistines. I think of David. Any other ideas out there that you've heard or seen? Yeah.
Well, my footnote says King Sargon of Assyria.
Ooh. King Sargon of Assyria. So that's kind of the just to the north and east power that comes and actually will destroy Israel, the northern kingdom. Not that king, but later on, that same empire. And that kind of makes sense based on verse 31, especially the last part of 31. There's another kingdom coming that's even worse than Sargon of Assyria. So that could be too. Could be all of them. Right? But what's the point? What's the point of verse 29? Regardless of who this, who the rod is, what's the point?
It's not gonna get better.
It's not going to get better, right? You escaped the wrath of this king, right, and his power and might, but you're not going to escape God's wrath and power, right? There are going to be others that are coming after him, and they're even going to be worse, right? So don't rejoice when this one person is gone, right? All right. The firstborn of the poor and needy, right? Does someone have, let's say, if someone's got like King James or any other Bible translation outside of NIV or ESV, someone read verse 30?
But the poor are going to feed in my pastures, and beggars rest in safety, while I let your posterity die out through hunger, killing off any that survive.
All right. Yeah, so the poor, the needy, the destitute, right? Who is the poor? Who is the needy? Could be Israel. It could be God's faithful people. That anyone who is faithful to the Lord, rejected the false gods of the Philistines while living in that territory. It could be them, right, as they were probably oppressed or treated as second-class citizens. Yet, God was going to tend them and care for them. So, and like I say, we even see that today, right, in most Islamic countries, right? Christians are, by the law of Islam, to be second-class citizens or worse. And, you have that kind of religious oppression, especially in many nations today. And I think your remnant, as opposed to God's remnant, right? Because it says, your remnant, it will slay, right? I will kill your root with famine, and your remnant, it will slay. Famine will slay your remnant. So, if you contrast your remnant, right, Philistia, right, those who survived this one king, you're not going to survive famine and what's coming after you, right? And that's why, we probably interpret that as God is giving full destruction upon this nation. All right. Any questions on 29 and 30? Once, twice. Okay, 31. So north could be just the kingdom of Assyria, or the kingdom that comes in after him. So yes, King Sargon II did conquer Ashkelon. He did conquer Gath in 720 BC. Let's see, when was King Ahaz died? Go back a minute. Okay, King Ahaz died in 715 BC. All right, so right before King Ahaz died, there we go. Right before King Ahaz died, King Sargon had conquered Ashkelon and Gath. So, yeah, makes good sense then. All right, the remnants of Philistia rebelled in 712 and in 705 BC. And then King Sennacherib finished them off in 701 BC in a little history lesson. So you kind of see this playing out, right? Okay, Sargon, he had some success and brought them down, but couldn't finish the job. They survived, they rebelled, and then there was utter destruction. So, yeah, you kind of see how this oracle plays out over a matter of 20 years. Okay. How did God's faithful survive the northern threat? Okay, so Isaiah chapters 36 and 37 kind of cover King Sennacherib and the threat to Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, and the people of Jerusalem. If you want to just read it straight, it's chapters 36 and 37. The short answer is chapter 37, verses 36 to 38. How did God save Israel, save Jerusalem from the northern threats? So Isaiah chapter 37, verses 36 to 38.
And the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when people arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies. Then Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and returned home and lived at Nineveh. And as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, Adramelech and Sharaz, his sons, struck him down with the sword. And after they escaped into the land of Ararat,
Esarhaddon.
Whatever, his son reigned in his place.
Oh yeah, lovely. Right? Yeah, God created turmoil, right? 180,000 dead overnight. No explanation. Just the fact that God sent the angel of the Lord, the true angel of death, right, upon the camp that was outside Jerusalem. And then all the chaos thereafter, right? That provided an opportunity for his own sons to rebel against him and kill him and take over. So, yeah. And that was that. And that's how God's faithful survived that unrelenting power from the north, the smoke cloud from the north. God spared his people, which actually gets to verse 32, right? God will establish his people. God has established Zion, right? I'll get the words. That's Isaiah 14. And so, you know, it's kind of two things, right? It's, first of all, panic not, fret not, O people of Jerusalem, right? Believe in the Lord your God, trust in him with all your heart. You're going to be firmly established, right? The Lord has founded Zion, and in her the afflicted of his people find refuge. It could also mean, if this message was delivered, and if there were faithful remnants or faithful people to the Lord, even in the land of Philistia, it would also be a message, move now, right? Move now. Don't get involved in this rebellion, right? Get out now. Where should you go? Jerusalem. Go to Jerusalem. God's people will take you in, and God will have you. So, could be both. So, there we go. There are things that God brings his people relief from oppression at an ugly price. That this is a message of this nation that has oppressed Israel for many, many years is going to be removed. That's a really ugly price to pay to deliver his people. It truly is, right? I can't think of other ways that God brings his people relief from oppression at an ugly price, either biblical or history, or present. How does God bring his people relief from oppression at an ugly price?
The sacrifice of Jesus.
Yeah, Christ's death is the number one answer, right? Yeah, that was an ugly price to pay. Suffering and death as, on the cross, right? He became the last of all, in the words of our gospel reading this morning. Yeah, that was an ugly price to pay. And he did it so that we are relieved from the oppression of sin, death, and hell. Yeah.
In some ways, you could say the entirety of World War II was about oppression versus freedom, and it was a terribly ugly price.
And that was a very ugly price. Yeah. My wife and kids were gone, so I picked up the movie Midway and watched it. Like, whoa! I was like, that is an ugly price. Yeah. But God used those means to end oppression. And it still wasn't swift. It still took a long time. And the amount of human cost. Yeah. So there you go. Any others? We'll be there. Questions? All right. And I think here's the other key point. Where to find refuge. Right? Where did Philistia seek refuge? Their political alliances with Egypt. Isaiah will come back to this a lot, and he will warn his own kings. Don't be buddy-buddy with Egypt. Don't seek relief in political alliances with the Pharaoh. Just don't. Trust in the Lord. He will deliver you. And Isaiah will say this over and over and over again to his own kings. But a lot of the nations did seek alliances, either with Egypt or with Assyria, for their own protection. Don't seek refuge in your rebellion attempts. God gave a message. You can rejoice that this one threat is gone, but there's more coming, right? Don't just rebel. Just know that it's going to be tough for you. And then don't seek refuge in Dagon, in Baal, or in Asherah. You can call on them, but they don't have ears to hear you. They don't have power to save you. And so they were not to find refuge in these things. Where do we find refuge in times of trouble today? Where might people find refuge in times of trouble today?
Promises of God.
Okay, the number one answer should be the promises of God. That's where we find refuge. We find refuge in the very promises of God. Right? When he makes an oracle, an utterance, no matter if it's weighty or not, right? Good news or bad news, we're going to trust him. And we're going to seek refuge in what God has promised. That's the number one answer. But does everyone find refuge in their trouble in the promises of God?
Is that the answer to question number 2?
Yes, that's it. Well, no, because God's people are still people.
Subset.
Yeah, it's a subset. But God's people are still people too. Right? And as sinners, sometimes we struggle.
Well, I think a good example of people seeking refuge is a commercial that was on TV last spring that was basically a confession of faith in science.
Mm-hmm.
Science will save us.
Science will save us.
I mean, that was literally what it said. Science will save us.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that, and I no, it said when science wins, we all win. And I'm thinking, well, I think the people of Hiroshima might feel differently about that. But-
Science is used negatively too.
Right.
Right.
But it was just, it was literally a confession of faith
Yeah.
in science.
Yeah.
And it was disturbing because science is not something to have faith in.
No,
I mean, it's a tool to use.
it's a
but-
tool. It's a tool to help serve our neighbor better,
Right, but it's sad if that's where you're gonna put your faith.
but it is not our refuge in time of trouble. Right? Ultimately, the Lord is, and God may use that tool, right, to do it. But ultimately, it comes from the Lord. And also, who gave scientists their brains? Right? Who gave them their reason and senses? Who still takes care of every scientist's reason and senses, whether or not they acknowledge Him? It's our God. Our Creator gave them reason and senses, and still takes care of them even if they don't serve and obey Him, love and cherish Him. Right? Still provides, and still provides for us through them. Right? But ultimately, we don't trust in the people. We don't trust in the tool. We trust in the Lord. He gave us the people. He gave us the tool. Yeah. All right. Good. I think that's a good spot to wrap it up. So next week, we're going to cover the oracle concerning Moab. Okay, this is a little longer. It's a two-parter, but we don't have to cover all of it this week. But we'll at least get started next week in this oracle. So how about we stand? Lord, remember us in your kingdom and teach us to pray.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Could I have everyone's attention for a minute?
Yeah.
You've seen all the quilts around everywhere with the results of this, these, and LWL. We'd like to tell you that they are for missions, our church sponsored for missions of these quilts and things. We'd like to welcome anyone else who would like to come and help us. We can use all shoulders, tires, or anything you can do to help us. We do lap ropes, adult bibs, they're not called that anymore, but that's what I'll call them. Adult bibs for nursing homes. We support nursing homes around Fairborn, Michael's house, Bethany, and service for others. That's our service to the missions to the church. Anyone who wants to join us, you're welcome to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you. When do you work?